Hi guys, welcome to another edition of Consciousness Hour. Been a lot of stuff happening since we were last on air. I've been down in Australia and I did the Afterlife, the Australian Afterlife Explorers Conference down there, which was absolutely wonderful because I had the opportunity to meet up with a lot of individuals that I have been in contact with over many years but never met face to face. For instance, the great Robert Bruce, PMH Atwater, and Alexander Defoe are just three individuals that I met up there, and lots of other people. So there is now growing interest in my work down in Australia. My intentions over the next three shows, all three shows are going to be quite subtly linked, in that I'll be interviewing three of my fellow authors of a book called Consciousness Beyond the Body, Evidence Reflections, which is edited by Alexander Defoe, or now Dr. Alexander Defoe, of Monash University in Melbourne. Indeed, I'll be interviewing Alex next month on this show as well, and we'll be talking about issues regarding this book. And then in April, we will have another return guest, Jürgen Siever. But today, I've got one of my favourite writers, and I mean that quite genuinely. Over the years, he's been a profound influence on my own writing, and it's a gentleman called Robert Waggoner. Now, this is the second time I've had the opportunity to interview Robert, and one of the great things about re-interviewing Robert was it gave me the opportunity to reread again his book, Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self, which is a tremendous book, and I strongly advise anybody out there who is of a similar attitude to myself, in the sense that such things as lucid dreaming, out of the body experiences are very, very real phenomena that we need to look at scientifically. In other words, these are extreme states of consciousness that suggest that reality is more than just the consensual reality we exist within. And I think within these areas there are massive clues as to the real, true nature of reality. And Robert Waggoner is the guy to go to in terms of lucid dreaming. So without further ado, is it Robert, or do you go by Bob as well? I never quite get confused on this. Do you go by Bob or Robert?
My family and virtually all of my friends call me Robert, so if you'll stick with Robert, that'll make it easier.
Robert sounds good. Robert sounds good, because I was saying earlier on off air that the Robert and Bob, as in Robert Bruce, always causes me a degree of confusion. But then again, I'm just a thick limey, and probably these problems happen to me all the time. So, just a little bit of background for everybody out there. I know that most of the listeners will probably know what lucid dreaming is, but what I'd like you to do, Robert, is to explain a little bit about your background, how you became involved, and exactly what lucid dreaming is. So just give us the background, so spend as long as you like. We have an hour here, but spend as long as you like just putting the pitch forward. What is lucid dreaming, and indeed why it is so important?
Right. So just to tell you a bit about myself, I was a young guy who had a very active dream life, very active, what you might call a psychic life as well. And back in 1975, I was reading a book by Carlos Castaneda called Journey to Ixtlan. And it's a wonderful book. It's really probably his best book of the entire series. But in that book, he talks about interacting with his shamanic teacher, Don Juan. And Don Juan, in this book, suggests to him that he become consciously aware in his dreams by finding his hands. And so there really wasn't a technique in the book, but it seemed like such a radical idea to become consciously aware in your dream. And so because I was interested in psychological states and hypnosis and all sorts of things, I just decided each night before I'd go to sleep, I'd just look at my hands and tell myself, tonight in my dreams I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. And just repeat that suggestion over and over, so it became my primary intent before I went to sleep. And so what happened, after doing that for 5 minutes, I'd go to sleep, and on the third night of doing this practice each night for 5 minutes, I'm walking through my high school hallway when all of a sudden my hands pop right in front of my face. And I say, my hands, this is a dream. And at that moment, it was so profound to realize that these characters over here, these football players, were actually dream figures. And the wall that felt so real and so actual and concrete was actually composed of dream stuff. And so I went on to have just a fantastic lucid dream for my first really induced lucid dream. But you have to realize that at that time it was 1975, and the evidence, the scientific evidence for lucid dreaming didn't appear in the popular press until 1981, when they brought people into the sleep lab, had them move their eyes left to right 8 times, because they were consciously aware within a dream, and they could move their eyes left to right 8 times in the lucid dream. And that was picked up by the rapid eye movement monitor and came to be the first scientific evidence for lucid dreaming. But as I mentioned in my first book, I kept going deeper and deeper into lucid dreaming. And it was about 10 years after that, in 1985, when I was doing a monthly goal of a group of lucid dreamers, and the goal was to find out what dream figures in your dream represented. And to me, that seemed like a very simple goal. I mean, I'd talked to dream figures quite a bit in my lucid dreams. But in that particular lucid dream for that goal, I went up to a gentleman and I asked him in my very nice Midwestern way, "Excuse me, what do you represent?" And instead of this gentleman responding, a voice boomed out from above him, a response. And so when I woke up from this lucid dream, I realized that perhaps something exists beyond the dream. You know, we're kind of structured in this life to focus on other people and animals and environment and settings and objects and all that kind of stuff. But what if there was something beyond all of that and it was accessible in a lucid dream? So after that, I just began to ask questions in my lucid dreams. I would ignore all the dream figures, I'd ignore the setting, and I would just shout out, "Hey, show me something important for me to see." And then suddenly the entire lucid dream would change. Or, "Hey, let me experience this concept." And then I would be experiencing full-on a concept. It's gotten to the point now where oftentimes when I know I'm going to have a profound concept experience, I'll just shout out, "Hey, let me experience this concept for 1 minute." And then I'll be having this incredible experience, and after 1 minute, it'll totally collapse, and I'll go back to a regular lucid dream. So as I played around with this more and more and played around with other ideas like getting information outside of time and space in lucid dreams and other things, even interacting with past life aspects in lucid dreams, I began to see that all of it connected to my beliefs, expectation, my focus, my intent, my will, and that I could manipulate the lucid dream best by manipulating my own mind, my own beliefs, my own expectations. And so eventually, after 10 years of playing around with this, I realized that I had to go beyond lucid dreaming. I had to even take this a step further. And I had to come to and understand the reality, not only of the awareness behind the dream, but the reality of all of this, the nature of things. And so when I got my mind into that space, I realized that all of this was a construct, that myself was a construct, that the nature of reality was apparently a construct. I bring up in my book that Maya, as was originally translated by the Sanskrit, is really about a creative transformation. And I think what they were trying to say is that your mind is being expressed, is being projected out there for you to experience. And you see that even in quantum physics experiments where the observer is embedded in the observation. So you realize that you're not dealing with an ultimate reality. You're dealing with a mentally mediated reality, a mentally influenced reality. And that's why Maya should really be seen as a creative transformation, a transformation of energy instead of illusion as it's typically brought about. But at that point, so with all these ideas in my head, oftentimes I'd go to sleep and the entire night I just experience blue light. So there is no me, no action, no plot, no objects, no symbols, just blue light. And I remember the first time it happened, I just looked at my dream journal and thought, what do I put in there? Blue light? I mean, nothing happened. And I began to have these experiences more and more regularly. I remember one morning my wife met me at the breakfast table, and she asked me what's going on with me. And I wondered why she was asking that. And she told me that the night before she had waken up and looked at me, and she said she'd never seen a person in such bliss. She really was kind of concerned about me. She had never seen something like that. And I told her I was trying to understand the actual nature of reality. But anyway, this kept going. Some other experiences happened, and finally an experience of non-duality happened, an experience of awareness within awareness. So there's really no subject-object in this experience. It's awareness within awareness. And suddenly that experience collapsed, and there was a gentleman standing there in a robe, and I asked him, was that a lucid dream? What was that, a lucid dream? And he looked at me and he said, no, to enter a lucid dream, go here. I stepped into that space and going through a tunnel and then emerged into a lucid dream, and eventually I woke up. When I woke up from that experience, I wondered, what was that initial, that thing, that awareness within awareness? And it was 3 years later, I was at an International Association for the Study of Dreams conference where Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche appeared. He's the Dzogchen Buddhist teacher who had just written the Tibetan Yogas of Dreams and Sleep, which is a wonderful book. And in there, in his talk, he said, well, the ultimate goal of dream yoga in the Buddhist tradition is an experience of the clear light, an experience of awareness by awareness itself, a non-dual experience, one without a subject and an object. And I was really thunderstruck that in my own strange way, I had bushwhacked my way after 20 years of mucking about to this kind of experience. And so since that time, that's kind of informed my entire view of things, and probably why I often write about lucid dreaming a little bit differently than other people and try to bring out aspects of it that other people aren't paying attention to. So that's it in a nutshell. That's my kind of first 20 years of lucid dreaming.
I think that's what's always intrigued me about your writing, in the sense that you're not restricting yourself to one particular area. You're very wide in your own reading, from the Castaneda material to the clear light of death to the Buddhist traditions. And I think this is very important because many of us, because I mean, for instance, I've tried to lucid dream for years and I just cannot do it. It just doesn't happen for me at all. I'm one of these profoundly stupid individuals that whenever I'm dreaming, I just seem to take everything literally. You know, when you see something really odd in a dream, you should think, well, this should waken me up because I've just seen something most peculiar. Obviously can't be reality, so I must realize I'm dreaming, and I don't. Whereas clearly there are techniques, and you mentioned about, you know, the looking at your hands thing, which I think is a very powerful way of coming aware in a dream state. But I think, to me, the dream states are telling us far more about the depths of consciousness and how consciousness can work. And one of the areas that a few years ago we had on the show a gentleman who was an expert on hypnagogic imagery, and I was discussing with him the levels of reality, and he very much said that, you know, lucid dreaming and hypnagogic imagery are also there. So what links do you see between hypnagogic imagery and hypnopompic imagery and the lucid dream? You know, are they just levels, or is there more to it?
You know, it's interesting. You can do this practice that people call wake-initiated lucid dreaming, where you can basically move from the waking state into a lucid dream. And so Stephen LaBerge has a wonderful technique. He just calls it the counting technique that he brings up in his book, Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming. So let's say it's 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon when you're normally feeling sleepy or tired or run down. So you just lay down and close your eyes, get into a relaxed state, and begin to count. 1, I'm dreaming, or 1, this is a dream. 2, this is a dream. 3, this is a dream. And oftentimes when you get to the point of 37, this is a dream, all of a sudden you'll realize that hypnagogic imagery has appeared around you. And it's kind of like, you know, this picture, this movie, this theatrical production is occurring around you. And because you're saying this is a dream, all of a sudden you often recognize, oh, this is a dream. This is a dream. But it's interesting, Anthony, at that moment, oftentimes it's like you have to physically or kind of literally pull yourself into the movie. It's like you have to enter the ongoing movement of the dream experience. And then of course you're lucidly aware. You know that you've entered the dream, and so it's a really fascinating state. So hypnagogia, of course, is normally translated as the gate to sleep. But these hypnagogic experiences are also interesting in as much as oftentimes when we're falling asleep, we'll see colors. So we'll see reds and blues and purples and all this kind of thing. I began to think one time, about 10 years ago, I began to think, is this a colored light representation of my mental processes at this time? And so what I began to do was relax and kind of shut down my mental processes more and more and more to see what would happen to this hypnagogic imagery display of light, until finally I got it to finally come to a cessation, a stopping point, and it was just gold light. I was just visually looking at gold light because I basically stopped my mind. And so people can play with this, these lights, we just think of them, it's just random, it's just, neurons firing, whatever it is. But actually, I think it's truly connected to our own mental processes, and we can play by playing with our mental processes and affecting the light.
Well, of course, there's the issue here, isn't there, when you talk to neurologists and you talk to individuals who research perception studies. And there is this glib argument about the way in which we perceive in dreams. But of course, a moment's reflection will point out that this is peculiar, because we do see light in dream circumstances. We see light as electromagnetic energy bouncing off objects. We see shadows. We see the normal light as if there's a light source or a general light source that we see in dreams. And yet there is nothing being stimulated via the retina or anything else, but it is being stimulated in a specific way in the visual cortex of the brain. And I cite in one of my books a series of experiments that were done with individuals who were involved in dream yoga, and they were able to go into very, very lucid states, and they could actually see the moment where the light was starting to stimulate them inside. Now, again, there is the concept of biophotons. There's the work of a guy called Istvan Bokken, who has been doing research into biophotons. And it seems that this is a form of energy that's drawn up from elsewhere. Now, I'm particularly intrigued by your comments about the blue light, because after I'm finishing this show, I'm going straight into another series of talks I'm doing with Graham Nichols, who is another author of Alex Defoe's book, and we're doing a talk on out-of-the-body experiences and how to stimulate out-of-the-body experiences. And as you're probably aware, one of the things Graham talks about is when he's in out-of-the-body states or lucid states or whatever he wants to call them, he has something called the cerulean effect, where where it starts to shift towards the blue end of the spectrum. And when this happens, he realizes that the actual imagery or the intensity of what he's experiencing is changing subtly. And he argues that whenever this happens, he tends to realize he's becoming precognitive, and that the elements of this particular sequence is suggesting that it's future vision. Now, have you ever experienced well, I know you have, so I'm sort of stimulating you to talk about it, but your experience of dream sequences where they have proven to be precognitive, A, can you give us a couple of examples, and B, what's your interpretation of what is taking place here?
Right, so that was part of my interest in dreams from the very beginning. As a teenager, I began to have precognitive dreams, and of course, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, from a linear perspective of time, from a materialist assumptions of science, precognitive dreams do not make sense. But at the time, for example, I believe it was in the summer of 1973. I'm fuzzing out on the date right now. Is either like July 13th or 16th, or that might be Bastille Day. Maybe it's June 13th. Anyway, one night I'm having a dream, and I see the moon come from the south to the north 3 times. A voice behind me is explaining, this means these incidents will occur in 3 years' time, so pay attention. And so that was kind of beautiful, because there was this unseen narrator who was basically cluing me in to what was going on here. And then all of a sudden I found myself in a riot. And so black and white people running about, a riot occurring. There's kind of a Dutch windmill building off to the side, and eventually I go somewhere else and kind of escape this riot. Well, as it turned out, 3 years later, exactly on that date, was the Soweto South African riots, which was kind of the transformative experience in that nation, moving it towards stepping apart from apartheid and moving to a more accepting democratic society. So that would be just one example, but sometimes it was just very simple that I would see my cat laying outside the doorway in a funny pose, and then I'd wake up, walk out of the room, and there's the cat laying in the exact pose. So it went from the profound kind of global events to just kind of simple events that would occur during the day. But this did become very important to me as I went deeper into lucid dreaming, because I realized that as you begin to interact with your larger awareness, and you do that repeatedly, consistently, quite a bit, it's basically like integrating the unconscious and the conscious minds. So you begin to make this pathway. In this new book that I've written with Carolyn McCready, Lucid Dreaming Plain and Simple, there's a wonderful woman, Claire Johnson, who has a PhD. She began to meditate so much in her lucid dreams that now, meditating in the waking world, she says it takes her about 5 minutes to get where it used to take her 20, 25 minutes. It's because she's been doing this in the lucid dream state. It's just kind of been taking out all the hindrances, taking out all the conflicts, all the blocks, and making the experience much easier. And so what I'm getting to say is that sometimes now in waking life, I'll have knowings. Sometimes I'll get to these in meditative experiences. Like, for example, one time I was sitting there meditating in the middle of the afternoon, got down to a deep space. I recognized the awareness behind the dream just by kind of the energy feel of it, even though I couldn't see anything. And so I'm having this waking meditative experience. I reach out to it, and I say to it a very open-ended question. I go, so larger awareness, what do you have to say to me now? And it tells me, we want you to send $10,000 to your friend Paul back in your hometown. And I think, what? And I come out of the out of this meditative experience. So the next day, I'm back in the meditative experience, and now I'm back deep, and now I can feel my larger awareness plus the deceased mother of my friend Paul. And I reach out to it and ask, hey, what do you have to say to me? And it says, we want you to send $10,000 to your friend Paul back in your hometown. And so when I woke up from that, I realized that whenever I have had two dreams that were the same, I'd always act on them. And this was 2 waking experiences deep in meditation. And so I talked to my wife. She suggested we send a note to my friend Paul back in our hometown, 8 hours away, and just tell him, look, Paul, we're your good friends. If you need help, we'll help you. Here's a check for $1,000. My friend called up about 4 days later when he got the note. He was so emotional, but the first thing he said was, he goes, you can't believe what's just happened. He said, a week ago, I went to my mother's gravesite and yelled at it, I'm going to kill myself if somebody doesn't help me. And he told me what had happened is 2 months earlier, his father had broken his hip in the bathroom. And now he's in a nursing home where they said they were going to teach him how to walk again, but my friend could see he'd never walk again. And so my friend wanted $10,000 to build on a disabled bathroom to his house and bring his dad home, and the state would give 40 hours of nursing care a week. And so we sent him the money. He built that on. His father came and lived with him for 6.5 more years and passed away at 92. So what I'm saying is that lucid dreaming might just sound interesting in and of itself, but if you start to do certain practices with it, like interact with your larger awareness, meditate or whatever, you can make profound changes in your waking life and actually clear out some of the debris that keeps us from experiencing these states more easily and more regularly in our waking life. And so this blue light, it might have to do with precognition. I did mention in my first book that oftentimes the blue light would often appear as a little dot that would just appear in waking states. I noticed it ever since I was a little kid that sometimes when I was deeply thinking about issues, I'd see a little blue dot off in the corner. I realized it wasn't an optical thing, but it would just occur at irregular times. But when it occurred in the dream experience, at the night experience, For some people, the blue light is connected with the heart chakra, so I don't know if this was an opening. I really don't know how to explain it to myself, but it's interesting that Graham Nichols has his view of blue light or getting to the blue light phase of things.
Well, Graham and I are sort of discussing or trying to discover the what's behind all this, and your work clearly is reinforcing this. Now, again, it's intriguing here, isn't it? Because I mean, there were so many questions coming up in my mind from the comments you were making there. You know, it seems to me that we can, in altered states of consciousness such as these, we're going into a deeper level of consciousness. We're actually welling into the upwelling of the 0 point field, the Akashic field, whatever we want to call it, the informational field that everything is created from. And when we go into these states, we seem to go into these kind of areas of communication. And clearly, within these places, they are timeless because they have to be, because by its very implication, future awareness, like from the mundane, like as you said, the position of your cat, clearly is suggesting that we can be aware of the contents of our future experiences. But of course, then we get the world affairs as well, and we could apply to that, you know, the work of J.W. Dunn in terms of Dunn dreams and everything else. But on top of this, I'm also always intrigued, because it dovetails very much into my own writing, your concept of the inner self, the higher self, what you call the bricoleur, the person that actually designs the dreams that we experience, which I think has great parallels with my own Damon Edelon hypothesis and the idea that we can attune into our higher self. So would you like to talk a little bit more about your experiences and your thoughts and feelings about what exactly is this entity? What are the processes? And some examples of the way in which you've interfaced with this entity in your past, and indeed are still doing so now.
So it's a wonderful question. It really was a breaking point in my lucid dream life in 1985 when I realized that there was likely an awareness behind the dream. And so at that point, I began to ask it questions, asked to experience concepts, and it was truly profound, the responses that would recur. In politics, they often talk about follow the money, or, you know, if you really want to understand something, follow the money. But I think when we're talking about consciousness, what we ought to follow is creativity. Where's the greatest creativity occurring? And in the lucid dream state, I could be relatively creative. A dream figure could be normally lesser creative, but the most creative thing was this awareness behind the dream. When I would ask to experience a concept like once I asked to experience the energy of the universe, and suddenly it was like someone opened up a fire hydrant and brilliant white light is just streaming into my dream body. It's being caught in particularly the palms of my hands and my upper chest. And this became so intense. It just kept coming and coming and coming, just like a fire hydrant of energy. Finally, I had to ask for the experience to stop. It was just too powerful. But after that, in waking life, when I'd hold my cell phone, the energy off of my cell phone actually kind of burned the palms of my hands. It was like I'd have to hold it like way out like this, just to keep it from affecting, you know, that physical sensation. But you can do some fascinating things. Like, for example, I was in London giving a talk. I suggested that if people wanted to use lucid dreaming for a spiritual approach, that they shouldn't do something silly like ask to experience God, because that's just too broad of a concept and it's too loaded of a term, and who knows what'll happen. Normally people wake up is what happens. But what they should do is ask to experience the quality of the divine. And so I suggested, when you become lucidly aware, stabilize the lucid dream and just shout out, "Now let me experience unconditional love," and see what happens. And so I suggested this to the crowd and some other ideas. And I came back 6 months later to give another talk in London, and a woman came up and said, or she told the crowd that she had done that earlier after hearing me talk about it. She said the resulting conceptual experience was so profound that when she woke up, she said she just cried tears of joy for 15 minutes to experience unconditional love at this deep level of awareness was just life-altering for her. Another woman who was taking part in one of my online classes. So I do these 30-day online classes with glidewing.com. This woman was a university student, lucid dreamer in Australia. And as a university student, she told me her goal was she wanted to experience becoming an electron. She wanted to have the experience of being an electron within a lucid dream. And so I explained to her that to do this, you have to keep letting go of your self-concepts, your self-ideations, your self-framework, because your beliefs and expectations would structure the experience, would limit it. And so it took her 4 or 5 lucid dreams to do it. And she wrote it up as an article in my magazine, Lucid Dreaming Experience, which anyone could get for free at luciddreammagazine.com. But she finally basically became an electron. She's bouncing about, having these just extraordinary experiences. But she said the fundamental insight that occurred to her after having this experience was the joy an electron feels. The experience is just fundamentally nothing but joy. And so you can look around the room now. I can look back here at our fireplace and all that kind of stuff and think of all those electrons. You know, they're just not there working, you know, like, oh, drudgery, oh, shit, I have to be an electron, blah, blah, blah. They're having an experience of utter joy, of all the combinations, all the vectoring, all the whatever they're doing. You know, think about that they're having just extraordinary experiences. But there are examples in my books where I give places where people have asked to have experiences and the larger awareness say it's just not possible. Or, for example, Pascal Ertain, who has a wonderful Lucid Dream forum, LD for All, she asked to experience the beginning and end of the universe. So she becomes lucid. Let me experience the beginning and end of the universe. Suddenly, a non-visible voice, which I assume is her larger awareness, says, the universe has no beginning and has no end. The universe is an everlasting cycle. And so you can see here how it refutes her assertion, her assumption, and posits a new way of looking at things. And so this larger awareness, I think, connects to this collective unconscious, or this implicate order. And this implicate order, if you follow it to its fundamental, then you get basically to the state of non-dual awareness. And that's why in my first book, I said one of the conclusions of lucid dreaming is that we all exist as an interconnected oneness. And if you come to see it in that frame, then these experiences of remote viewing, of out-of-body experiences, having verifiable evidence, and these kind of things aren't that hard to understand. Telepathy, all this kind of stuff. If we exist as an interconnected oneness, then all of that can be explained. And I think that's really where lucid dreaming has taken us. It's showing us that a collective unconscious exists. It's accessible through our daemon, our inner self, our larger awareness. And if we take it even further, we can see that we're all part of an interconnected oneness and that we can access that knowing.
I have to agree totally with you on that, because over the years, the 10 years I've been writing now and the various books I've written, these are very much the conclusions I'm coming to. And I'm coming through to the conclusions purely and simply from my reading and my research into the science, my research into neurology and quantum physics and cosmology. As I say, because I'm one of these hopeless individuals that can't have esoteric experiences, which is really sad. But effectively, you know, that to me, it is self-evident, and the non-dual position is the one that makes so much logical sense. And when you start going back to the most esoteric traditions, you know, from the Kabbalah to the concept of Brahman to the teachings of shamanism and everything else, they all come down to this idea that we are one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. And therefore, everything is a unity, and the idea of separation is an illusion. Now, of course, some of the latest research in quantum physics is definitely coming down this route. And I was delighted, you know, when you indirectly referenced the work of David Bohm there in terms of the implicate order and the explicate order, because the work of David Bohm is becoming more in vogue. And now with the recent discovery of gravity waves, one of the things that I've seen time and time again is suddenly this is vindicating David Bohm. Because, of course, David Bohm was very much of the school of Albert Albert Einstein that all the weird quantum effects that we discover is because at a deeper level of reality, we don't have all the information yet. And therefore, that is why things seem odd, is because we don't have all the information. And clearly within lucid dreaming, we can experience this, and the voice we hear in our head, the guiding voice, the bricklayer that designs your dreams. Because I think it was you that stimulated me to the thought that I'd never really realized before that dreams, your everyday dreams, have a creator, that you experience the dream, but you're not creating the dream, you're experiencing it like you watch a movie. And that was and I thank you for that, Robert, because that was quite a wake-up call, because it's so obvious. But it's not, because it's almost in plain sight, and it's odd, isn't it?
Right, and also our language kind of serves to cloak that. We say that I dreamt this, basically saying I created this. I mean, that's the implication, but the fact of the matter is that there's more involved than just you, the waking ego self, in the creation of any dream experience, of every dream experience. And so that's why that's one of those areas where our language serves to do a disservice, but by cloaking the actual nature of dreaming. But I did want to say, though, that one of the beautiful things about lucid dreaming and interacting with the larger awareness and having out-of-body experiences and others, it basically showed me that consciousness is an attribute of this awareness, this field of non-duality, if you want to talk about it like that, and that consciousness can take many forms. So you can have the waking ego self form. Consciousness can be part of that larger awareness. It can be in a different form, a different layer of self, of awareness. And so consciousness has many forms and also many configurations. So not only can I be lucidly aware in a lucid dream, but also I can have experiences when I'm falling asleep and feel like I'm hearing all this humming and buzzing and begin to float out of my body and experience the apparent room from 6 feet above my body and wonder, how am I experiencing having this experience? And so you start to see the malleable nature of awareness, the malleable nature of consciousness, that it comes in many forms, many configurations, that it connects at a certain level in this base field of awareness, but we're kind of the quantum foam experience of that base awareness. So that's why in this new book, Consciousness Beyond the Body, that Alexander Defoe served as the editor for, that's why I decided to write a chapter, and it's really about what I consider the shifting states hypothesis, because I wanted people to realize that, in my mind, lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences share many similarities, but when you get to a certain detailed level, then they diverge, and you can show that one differs from the other. But in some cases, however, our awareness shifts. We're able to shift from a lucid dream into an OBE, sometimes consciously and intentionally, and at other times unintentionally and without really awareness of what we're doing. Much as we can shift from waking to sleeping, or waking to a trance state, or from hypnagogia back to waking, or whatever. So the shifting states hypothesis is what I came up to kind of explain some of these experiences that have elements of both states, or multiple states. And so that's what I wanted to get out there, to kind of show people that we got to think of the form of consciousness, the projections of consciousness as various forms, and that sometimes these forms actually intermix.
I think that's of profound importance, and I read through your chapter of Alex's book, and I was very intrigued by this, because I think this is much needed. You tend to find, or I find in my reading of the subject, there seems to be two schools. There's very much the people in the lucid dreaming where they say, this is a known psychological effect. We know that, sort of people like Labage and everybody else, prove this to be the case. Whereas out of the body experiences seem to be starting moving into the kind of the areas of New Ageism and everything else. Whereas a recognition that what we're doing here is, it's the same phenomenon. There's just a gradation between the two, and you can slip between the two quite easily. And this has always been my argument, and I have to thank in many ways Graham Nichols for this, one of the other authors in the book, in the sense that when I wrote my book, The Out-of-Body Experience, I was very much of the opinion that literally when we went into out-of-the-body states, we were existing in a brain-created facsimile of the world we believed it to be. Like, for instance, I can have an idea of what's behind my head, and I can visualize myself moving around in that area and that space. And that's why I can't look at detail in any great detail when I'm in and out of work, if I was ever in an out-of-body state. And this is why people can never actually report things. But if we start looking at it in a much deeper level and saying that this reality we're existing in now is only believable because it is consensual and because effectively other people seemingly can confer and share the experience and confirm that certain things are in certain positions. But when one makes the sudden realization that these people that are confirming this alternate reality are also part of your phaneron, are also part of your brain structure, suddenly, so when I'm in a dream and somebody confirms something that we both see, that proves that that reality is just as real. And I'm reminded of your particular case. Was it the incident when you were flying and you were knocking people's hats off or something, you know, and the way in which there was a reaction? Can you just explain that? Because I still love that event, because that was, I think, a profound experience for you, wasn't it?
Right. So for many lucid dreamers, we just assume that we control the dream. And one time in my early years, I was flying about a crowd of people, and just out of sheer mischief or whatever, I decided to start knocking off the hats of everyone who was wearing a hat in the crowd below me. And so I'd fly down, knock off a hat, fly down, knock off a hat. And so I was flying down like the fourth or fifth time to knock off a hat. And right as I did so, a hand reached up from the crowd and just stopped me in mid-flight. And that really struck me that at that moment, I was not in control, that something surprising, unexpected, and truly profound had happened. And it made me realize at that moment that to say that a lucid dream means that we control the lucid dream is really an error. We can influence and manipulate and direct our focus, much like we do in waking life, but just as we don't control the interstate highway or M5 or whatever, you know, we don't control the lucid dream. We influence and manipulate and relate to it, but we don't. But it also, when I began to do some experiments like with Ed Kellogg and Linda Maggione on mutual lucid dreaming, did some dream telepathy experiments with friends, I began to realize that sometimes when you seem to enter another person's perceptual bubble, their dream bubble, if you want to put it in that way, you can tell because the color saturation is different. You know, there's that philosophical issue of, you know, is my red, your red, and all that stuff. But I could tell when I was in someone else's dream, because oftentimes the symbols are not my symbols. They don't have anything to do with me. I just, you know, they just don't relate. But also the colors were off. It was like some people had this deeper color palette and other people had, you know, different shades and all that my dreaming self was not used to, and you could experience that. But it is an interesting thing, though, is this issue of consensus. Are we in this realm in a type of consensus trance? And when you look at dream telepathy, you begin to see that maybe we are, and that maybe all of this is underpinned by telepathy, that on a telepathic level, all the dream bubbles or all the waking bubbles are in communication and are agreeing, making consensus, but each exists within their own mind stream, their own dream bubble or waking bubble, if you prefer. But the beautiful thing about this entire book, Consciousness Beyond the Body, is in certain chapters, it makes you look at these fundamental assumptions that all of Western science seems to be predicated upon, and all of which normally the way that we look at the world is predicated on. And part of lucid dreaming is becoming aware of strange events in your experience and waking up to the fact that, oh, this is a dream. And I wish science would become aware of some of these strange events that are occurring in waking experience and use it to wake up more so to the larger aspects of reality.
Well, I think, again, there's a whole string of things that sort of stimulate in my mind from the things you were just saying there before. I'm particularly intrigued by the implications of qualia and intensity of colour and such like, and getting into somebody else's dream. So therefore, you're getting into their worldview. You're getting into the way in which their brain interprets reality. Because, of course, as a sociologist, one of the things that has always fascinated me is the idea of the way in which social constructs define the way we perceive certain things. And I was very impressed many, many years ago when I came across something called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, about the idea that language itself, and you've touched upon this earlier, that language itself constructs the reality around us. But of course, we all live in this kind of very imbued personal state that everything we perceive is somehow controlled by the world we see. So therefore, I'm always fascinated, for instance, by individuals who hold very, very strong religious beliefs or very, very strong belief systems of any nature, whereby the world that they perceive continually reinforces their belief systems. I'm not religious, but I have friends who have, and the way they perceive information and reality is totally different. But of course, if we are in some way collapsing the wave function from quantum physics terms of that particular reality, we will continue to collapse the wave function of the reality that we are expecting. And of course, in dreams, they reinforce that. So in terms of going back then to the overlap between the lucid dream and the out-of-body experience, your position has always fascinated me in terms of this, because you're one of the few writers that actually is acknowledging that there is overlap between the two and there are similarities. For instance, I remember in your book the way you stated that you were in an out-of-body state, which seemed to be a definite out-of-body state, and you were flying towards a house, but in fact there was a window which allowed you access into the house that didn't actually exist in three-dimensional reality. So what exactly is your position now? And indeed, probably for the listeners out there, we've got about 10 minutes left, is your Robert Waggoner's opinion on how you will know whether you're in a lucid dream state or whether it's an OBE, and indeed, what are the differences and what are the similarities? Because this is a golden opportunity for the Robert Waggoner to explain these things to us, so I'd be really keen to hear your opinion.
Well, I have to say that I've been influenced to a large degree by talking with Ed Kellogg, who is also one of the chapter authors in this book, Consciousness Beyond the Body. And through my own personal experience, I began to have OBEs about the same time I began to have lucid dreams in my teenage years. And so there's the beginning issues that differentiate the two. So a lucid dream is you realize within a dream that you're dreaming. So you're having the dream experience, you see something strange, a flying elephant, and you think, wait a second, that's impossible. Oh, this is a dream. Normally, out-of-body experiences occur when you're in that kind of in-between state. You're there in bed, you're falling asleep, you begin to hear maybe some humming or vibrations around your body. You might feel some energy kind of moving throughout your body. You have these kind of precursor experiences.
Just a quick question there, Robert. In terms of the humming, you have never, you can go back to your thread in a second, but you've never experienced the humming in a lucid state. You only ever experienced the humming in an OBE or a potential OBE state?
You know what? And so, see, this is how this gets complex, because so that's a normal precursor of having an out-of-body experience. And normally after that, you'll find yourself floating above your body or rolling out of your body or seeing these ghostly arms, and you're having an out-of-body experience. But what I mentioned in my chapter on the shifting states hypothesis is there's this kind of intermixture of lucid dreams and OBEs. Sometimes you can be in the dream state or in a lucid dream state and begin to hear humming and vibrating. It's as if you're beginning to have a lucid dream from within, or you're beginning to have an OBE from within a lucid dream. And I found this unintentionally happening in some of my lucid dreams much earlier. And when I interacted with experienced lucid dreamers, they mentioned much the same thing, that they've had that on occasion as well. Then there's the examples of like Ryan Hurd, who is really an expert on, really a wonderful writer on sleep paralysis. If you have a lot of experience with sleep paralysis and are concerned about that, you should definitely get his book on sleep paralysis. But he said he had so many experiences of sleep paralysis that he realized that there was a way to go into a lucid dream from sleep paralysis or go into an out-of-body experience from sleep paralysis. And so to go into a lucid dream from sleep paralysis, he would just vividly begin to imagine that he was flying over the city or flying over a lake. Just vividly imagine it, and then boom, suddenly he'd be flying over the city. And he realized that he was in a lucid dream state. To get into an OBE state, oftentimes I believe what he'd do is concentrate on his third eye or concentrate on a point beneath his belly button and then try to sit up in the sleep paralysis. And oftentimes at that point, he would be OBE and roll out of his body and begin to explore the neighborhood or whatever. And so you saw that there's different ways, there's different forms of this. But just to get to the basic point, if you get this book, Consciousness Beyond the Body, and you get to the very end of Ed Kellogg's chapter on phenomenology and experience, at the very end, he gives a wonderful summation of all the differences between OBEs and lucid dreams. And then if you get to my chapter, you'll see that there's certain, because of my shifting states hypothesis, that sometimes we shift states within the experience, that some of the overlapped experiences where you can't be sure, was that an OBE or a lucid dream because it had elements of both? It might be the fact that within the lucid dream you shifted to an OBE, or within the OBE you shifted to a lucid dream form. So what I'm trying to say is these are different forms of projections of consciousness, and there's nothing that essentially keeps you from shifting your placement on that continuum of consciousness. And so because of that, you're going to have some hybrid experiences that have elements of both, or that are in this indeterminate category where you can't really specify whether that was a lucid dream or an out-of-body. So that's basically the thesis that emerges in my work. And again, a lot of it was from talking to Ed Kellogg, who's a brilliant lucid dreamer and also a person with many out-of-body experiences as well.
What does that tell us about veridical experiences? What does that tell us about the external reality, consensual reality that does seem to be external to our minds? What's the implications for that?
Well, so in both lucid dreams and in OBE state, you can seek out evidence. You can seek out evidence that will confirm that you visited a friend far away or got information from someone else and woke up with it and can verify it. But as a practical matter, getting information in a lucid dream can be complicated because sometimes the information comes literally and sometimes the information comes symbolically. It is a dream after all. And so you oftentimes have to be careful when you get that information. But what I've seen in OBE experiences is oftentimes the information seems a little bit, tends more towards the literal. It's more literal than symbolic. But even in some OBE experiences, you do see the symbolic aspect portrayed when you're getting information that you wish to verify. But once again, that kind of shows some of the distinctions between these two.
Right, thank you for that. Now, just very quickly, in terms of the book, I just need to stress to the listeners out there that this book is totally free and, incredible. And I'm amazed that the group of us that have actually got together to write, I mean, my responsibility is very, very tiny. I just wrote a very, very small section at the end. Unfortunately, I couldn't contribute a full chapter because I was in the throes of writing my 9th book. But effectively, having met up with Alex and seeing and being involved in the launch of the book down in Australia last week, I'm really delighted to be involved in a very small way in a very, very interesting project because this book is available for free. So it's not, you don't have to pay for it or anything else. So it's called Consciousness Beyond the Body, Evidence and Reflections, and it can be downloaded for free from Alex Defoe's own personal website, which is www.alexdefoe.com. That's ALEXDEFOE, all one word, alexdefoe.com. Check it out and read it, because it really is a world-shaking piece of work. And it really will. If people look at this book objectively, it's a very, very powerful book. And it's, again, the book that's a reflection of a group of writers who are on the bridge between spirituality and science. In other words, we are the guys that are really trying to push the envelope out here. We're not part of the crazy new age wing that actually believes anything. We're very much the individuals trying to do the science, even if it's experiential. But of course, the issue is, because it's experiential, it's very, very difficult to prove. And the only way people can do it is experiencing them themselves. So, for instance, if you do any of these techniques and you have a veridical out-of-the-body experience, let us know. Because it's only through evidence that we can bring forward to the materialist reductionist scientific world to prove that this is something that tells us a great deal about reality. Right, we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left, Robert. Would you like to tell the listeners what your future projects are, a little bit more about your new book with Caroline, and any other things you want to say, how people can link with you, how they can download your material and your website and everything else?
Yeah, so if people are interested in lucid dreaming and want to see it from a very advanced perspective, even if they don't have an experience, I'd recommend getting my first book, Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self. You can read some of the reviews on it, and it'll just show you the potentials of lucid dreaming and the depth of that experience. But I decided a couple of years ago to partner with Carolyn McCready there in London and write this book, Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple. And what I wanted to do was give tips and techniques on how to induce lucidity, how to stabilize the experience, because you can't do anything unless you create a stable mental platform within the lucid dream experience, and then how to experiment in a thoughtful and intelligent manner. Because you realize that it's not so much that you're manipulating the lucid dream as you're manipulating your own mind, your own beliefs, expectations, your focus, your intent, that are kind of, in a certain sense, creating and constricting your experience. And so you need to understand all of that to become a good lucid dreamer. But this is a book for new lucid dreamers. It's a book that has all the latest science as well about the study of lucid dreaming. And finally, I also create a magazine along with my co-editor and friend Lucy Gillis in Vancouver, British Columbia. And that's called the Lucid Dreaming Experience. And the Lucid Dreaming Experience you can get for free at luciddreammagazine.com. You can read all the old past issues. This issue that I have in my hand, September 2015, is all about healing in lucid dreams. So I'm talking here about lucid dreamers who physically heal themselves within lucid dreams, or they might emotionally heal themselves in lucid dreams. But there's a wonderful article in here of something that is a non-local healing, where a woman, Jenny Miller, apparently heals her father of leukemia. And what was even more interesting, not only did his blood count totally change after the lucid dream, but a lesion that had been on his liver suddenly disappeared as well. Because in the lucid dream, she just asked for her father to be healed. She said suddenly she began to see light coming out of his face and realized that he's being healed. The doctor, of course, was stupefied that suddenly his blood count had changed. And then even more incredibly, this lesion on his liver disappeared and was no longer evident in CAT scans. So this just gives you some sense of the depth of lucid dreaming. I conduct online classes with glidewing.com about twice a year. They go on for a month. And so I'm always happy to interact with people. You can go to my website on my book, lucidadvice.com, and also ask me questions, because I'm always interested in people's experience and want to just move along with the science and the experience of lucid dreaming.
Thank you very much, Robert. That was absolutely terrific. And of course, if anybody is interested in the background to lucid dreaming and the semi-fictional ideas of lucid dreaming, of course, there's the fantastic movie Inception. And of course, there's the rotoscoped version of the movie Waking Life, both of which I strongly advise anybody to watch, because they really give the ideas of exactly what's going on. Right. Thank you very much, Robert. The next show, this show will be out probably within the next week to 10 days. And as usual, I'd like to thank Dia Nunez in the background there in Denver, Colorado, who without Dia this show could not ever happen, and we never ever should forget that. Also, just to let you know that the author of Consciousness Beyond the Body, Evidence and Reflections will be joining me next month, which is Dr. Alex Defoe, and I'm really looking forward to chatting to him. And then afterwards, in the following month, we're going to have a wonderful opportunity with a returning guest called Jürgen Siever, who has some fascinating experiences out of the body in alternate realities. So don't miss these shows. We're building up a massive momentum at the moment on Consciousness Hour. So again, Robert, over there in whereabouts are you in? Are you in Iowa?
That's right. I'm in a university town, Ames, Iowa, and it's a wonderful, beautiful day with 3 inches of new snow, so we're totally encased in white.
Nice and crisp. That's really good. Okay, and thanks very much, Robert. And again, thanks, dear. And we'll be speaking to you guys again in a month's time. Okay, cheers. Bye-bye.